outro.
Okay.
Well, hi again, everybody. Welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football, and this is the Sports Page with Bob Case. Bob, every once in a while we get somebody that's a special guest, and you've had many. Today is another one. You just keep adding to the list, just one check mark after another, but a baseball great. And from a historian's standpoint, we're going to talk about this, but a gentleman who had one of the best and most coincidental 1974 career years in so many different ways, but he's not only a great baseball player, a veteran of the league, World Series champion in so many different ways, but he's also, Bob, a friend of yours. And that's the thing that fascinates me is there's so many of these guys that are humble, they are down to earth, they're great people. And when they meet a guy like you, they just instantly click. And the friendships that you've had over the years, especially in the baseball world, is really something special. So thank you for bringing Joe Ferguson to the show today, Bob.
Yeah, my honor. And I can't wait to hear some of the stories Joe will tell because, being a baseball purist and, having been around this game most of my life, I appreciate everything. And I was a catcher like you, Harper, in American Legion and, pro and all that. But so I love that position. But all I can say is, I checked out Joe's career. And if Joe, he had 1 year where he started a lot of games. What did he do? He had 22 home runs. I think he had 274. And, he was, because the Dodgers had some great catchers back there with Yeager and Socha and all these guys. But Joe, he was a stud as a catcher. I mean, he had 122 home runs in his career. I mean, think about that. Played in 2 World Series, hit a home run in the World Series, really did some. And like, as you said earlier, Harper, in 1974, 2 of the biggest plays in the history of baseball, the catch. Now, listen, I've been to World Series all my life. I've probably been to that throw from right field. I was sitting up there in aisle 215 in the club level with Casey Stengel on my left, Rod Dedeaux on my right, Cary Grant next to him. And that catch, it will be embedded in my mind. I've seen it a million times in replays, but I've never seen a better throw. This is a catcher. This isn't an outfielder. This is a catcher. Made a throw to home plate like I have never seen in my life. I don't know what. Cut in front of Jimmy Wynn, I think it was, and just thought it was unbelievable. I mean, it was like something. There are certain things I've always said in my life that if you shut your eyes, like Ted Williams' swing, I can shut my eyes and see that swing. Okay, I can shut my eyes and see that play in right field from a catcher, no less. But anyway, I'm just thrilled. And then to think that I have an actual painting of Hank Aaron 714, and there's number 13 right in the painting. It's a beautiful color painting of him hitting the 714, and there's Joe catching behind him.
Yeah,
well, you got to ask Joe if he called for what pitch he called for on that.
There's a story about that. There's always a story about that stuff,
Yeah.
So, if you want me to tell it, I will. So
yeah, go.
Well, first, a long-winded introduction. We're 3 minutes in the show, and you haven't said a word yet, Joe. So first and foremost, welcome to 100 Yards of Football and the Bob Show. Thank you for being a part of it with us today.
So that was the first game that we played Atlanta for the year. That was opening day for them. They had come from Cincinnati. If you remember, Hank Aaron had hit the tie-breaking home run against Billingham in Cincinnati. And so he comes to there, and that's their opening day there in Atlanta. And Al Downing was the pitcher. His first at bat, Al Downing threw 4 straight balls, had no chance to even take a swing at him. They were down and away, down and away, down and away. And so you got to understand that this guy was going to break the record, right? There was nobody that was going to stop him from doing it. So for me, I'm back there, saying to myself, no matter what pitch he throws, and he's basically, whatever I put down, he's going to throw it. If he hits the home run, he hits it. And at least you get to see it, right? But the next at bat, he came, and the first pitch that Al threw was a fastball about shoulder high, which he never, ever missed. Just backspinned it up there, and it was out of the ballpark in about 2.5 seconds. So, and that was the home run, and everybody's running all over the field. I couldn't even get close to the guy. There were so many people at home plate, I couldn't even get close to him to shake his hand. So, so that was that story. And I believe it was one of the pitchers for Atlanta. They got the ball.
Tom House. Yes.
Tom House. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So that was that part. And then the rest of that story is that we won every game for the rest of the season against Atlanta, because in those days we played 18 games.
Wow.
One team in your division, you played 18. We won 17 in a row and went to the World Series.
I did not know that. Unbelievable.
Well, Joe, I've got a couple of slides here. There are several of Hank without you in the background. There's one here that I've got. I want to ask you a little. Bob said, I'm teasing with you, of course, and that looked like a middle fastball. You throw one finger down, and it was almost as if a changeup. And did you say it's coming right down the middle? Hank, you better get a hold of this, because it sure looked like that was the batting practice pitch that every guy is waiting for their entire life.
Yeah.
And no outside corner, no inside, no spinner, nothing like that. I'm teasing, of course, but what was it like for you in game planning before Hank even before the game even starts? Did Walter Alston or any of the coaches bring it up and say, hey, if he's going to do it and do it at home, it's going to be against us, unfortunately, but this is something that let's do this and just get the rest of this game over with. Was there any discussion at all about Hank and the importance of this to the history of baseball?
None at all. None whatsoever.
Let's just get him out like we would anybody else, right?
Just try to get him out. I mean, nobody ever said a word to me. Nobody said a word to Al Downey. And so, I mean, they just went out. He was going to pitch his own game. He was basically a fastball. He was a sinker, changeup guy. That's what he was. He used to be a real hard thrower when he was with the Yankees, but not anymore. And so he was just relegated to sinkers and changeups, and he had a good one. So basically, it was just you're going to throw a fastball or you're going to throw a changeup. You got two to pick from, but you can see where the pitch was. Okay, he doesn't ever miss that pitch. If he's looking for a fastball, he doesn't miss it. So. So that was it. But like I said, nobody realized that they never won another game.
I hadn't thought about that either. And you're a pretty good baseball team going into 74. Obviously, you're a World Series component. But the Big Red Machine, right? Cincinnati had gone twice and lost to the A's. They were just getting turned up, but they had not won a World Series yet. They were still kind of void. They went in 70, 72, 73. So they were what a competitive group of teams that were playing. The Giants were all right. Padres, they were whatever. But then you throw Atlanta in the mix, and then Houston. It was a pretty interesting race, wasn't it?
Yeah. The Giants always had a pretty good team, but they never had the pitching to go too far with their pitching. They had guys that could hit, but they didn't have the other ingredient. And pitching is what's going to dictate what happens, especially in a short series. And for the most part, if you've got four pretty good starters, you're going to get into the playoffs. So, wow. But the thing is, since Cincinnati in 1973, that we lost that year, but we were ahead going into September. And we went into a dry spell, and they didn't. And they went ahead of us. And that year in 73, I hit 25 home runs and knocked in about 85 runs. And I was number 3 in the voting for the MVP of the league.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was the next year we kind of grew up. That's what it was. We just grew up as a team. We had the guys that had played the year before, but they just become better. They became more comfortable, and I think that's the reason why we ended up beating them.
Well, you mentioned Al Downing. We're looking at Al right now. He was on the mound for the pitch for the game, obviously, that Hank hits it out. Oddly enough, number 44 there. When I found this picture, I had to throw it in because Al's head is down. You look a little dejected and all that, but really describe what it's like for you, the joy of knowing that is a significant part of baseball history. And for obvious reasons, it was a changing of the guard from Babe Ruth and the whole 20s, 30s, 50s era, moving ahead, baseball becoming a modern sport again. And even though that the game has changed very little, there are certain things that obviously have been manipulated, so to speak, the DH and all that kind of stuff. But the game itself is still the same. And you were on the field when it happened. I mean, you were right there with the umpire when he touches home plate, and that moment was sealed in history. And then you're right. There's a lot of chaos around there, isn't there? I mean, immediately after. Was there anything in the crowd that night? Was there a certain buzz going around? It was a full deck. I mean, for obvious reasons, that doesn't always happen in the Atlanta area. But what was it like for you, just seeing the aura and the crowd and everything that was a part of it?
Well, it was the best. It was the best crowd they were going to get for the rest of the year because it was packed, and they never had another packed stadium the rest of the year.
Nope, not at all.
First of all, in Atlanta was a baseball town, but not for Atlanta, not for the Braves. It was a Dodger town. It was for the Dodgers. They had so many Dodger clubs way back. Okay, when they used to have, they would have like 26 ball clubs. Okay, in a minor league organization, and most of them were down in the South. And so it was a big Dodger town. So they were not Braves fans. Now later on they became Brave fans because of the great teams that they developed. But at that point they were not.
And in some cases, I think that's still true. Yes, the Dodgers travel well. The Cubs travel well. There are certain teams that whenever they come here into Atlanta, a lot of their fans have moved here and live here, and will spend the dollars to go see the opponent. The road team is actually the one that has St. Louis. They travel well and have for years. Yep. Not so much San Francisco or the Padres, but certainly the Dodgers have. Did you notice that in other ballparks too, when you went to Milwaukee or New York or maybe St. Louis, that gosh, we got a lot of our own people here?
Yeah, it happens in certain stadiums. Los Angeles would always have other fans there because I mean, most of the people never ever lived in Los Angeles before. They weren't born there. So there were a lot of people that moved to Los Angeles that obviously were fans of the other baseball clubs. So there was always a lot of fans from other ball clubs in Los Angeles. St. Louis was that way. Giants, not so much, because they were kind of isolated for a long time there. So that was never really created there. San Diego the same way. You never saw many people in San Diego. The
right.
People in Los Angeles, all the fans from LA used to go down to San Diego because it was very close by. And the same thing with the fans in San Francisco. You have LA fans there.
Yeah, and Bob, you notice stuff like that too. When you're at Anaheim Stadium early in your life, when you're involved with Major League Baseball, Yankee fans would show up. You'd have certain, maybe Tigers, not so much, Cleveland, but there were some places that it was almost as if it were half a home game.
Whenever the Cubs played at Dodger Stadium, I'd see more Cub people than Dodger people. Cubs had a huge following out here in LA. Huge.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, Joe, let's go back in your career to the beginning. I know we started kind of in the middle of it right there, but you're in Stockton, right? University of Pacific. You end up playing there. Talk a little bit about, the high school experience, and was there a specific coach or a teammate that really got you to start feeling like I kind of got it. I can hit and throw and run, and I've got a little bit of power, and my arm is good, and I can move around. This game is getting easier for me when it's getting a lot harder for others. What was that experience like for you?
Well, the thing is, my whole life growing up in high school, I was a little guy. I was not a big guy. In other words, I played basketball in high school, and I played baseball but I was very small. I was the junior. I was still only about 5'6" or 5'7" as a junior in high school, and I never got my growth until between my junior and senior year, and I grew about 6 or 7 inches that summer.
Oh, wow.
I came back to high school, and no one knew who in the hell I was. So, I mean, I'm walking around through trying to say hi to people, and they didn't know it was me. And so that's when I think things kind of changed for me because I got bigger, I was stronger, and at that time, I was trying to probably play basketball more than baseball. I developed a love for basketball, and I became a pretty good basketball player. And I scored a lot of points in high school. I was scouted by about 45 or 50, colleges, and every UCLA came to see me play. And I ended up going to University of Pacific because the center who had been there the year before kind of recruited me to go there, and that's where I ended up going. And I played basketball there. Now that time, freshmen could not play on the varsity team. If you remember.
Yes.
And so you played your freshman year, and you played the other colleges and their freshman teams. And then as a sophomore, I was on the varsity team at that point.
What position did you play, Joe?
Think about that. I never played baseball in college.
What position did you play as in basketball?
I was a guard.
Oh,
yeah, and I was a scoring guard. I was a big scorer in high school. The only problem is that coach was not a fan of me. I guess I don't know why, but he never played me much. And he got to the point that I got to my senior year, and all of a sudden he says, "Well, now it's your turn." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, now you're gonna be able to start." And I said, "No, not actually." And he goes, "What do you mean?" He says, "I quit." And I left college. And I said, I knew at that point, and there's another backstory here that we'll get to later. I decided I was going to be a baseball player. And so I went back home and I joined a little semi-pro club in San Jose, California, where my parents were. And I started playing baseball there. And that's where I was scouted there by the Los Angeles Dodgers.
Joe, that's just fascinating that I'm going to call it a relationship breakdown between your head coach and you and the lack of communication. And you go, if I knew that I wasn't going to play until my senior year, which is basically what you just said just a moment ago. I know there's a lot more to it, but there was a wound there, right? You never let me know what's going on. You everything was about all these other guys. And what nerve for you to be able to have the confidence in yourself, because back then they didn't have a portal to go to or the safety of going somewhere else without losing eligibility. What was that like for you from a mental standpoint, where you go, before you even had the coach speak to you, you were basically already checked out? Is that a fair assessment?
I'd already made my mind up to do that before I even started working out, before the games even started. And the reason why is because during the summer, I used to go play in the baseball college leagues, okay? And that's where I played baseball. In other words, I played up in Alaska. I played in Illinois Collegiate League. I played in Canada, in Saskatchewan. They had a big league up there.
Yep.
And that's where I was actually scouted for the first time, okay, by Red Adams, which you guys know, who became the pitching coach for the Dodgers. He scouted me in Saskatchewan, believe it or not. And at that time, I was a pitcher, not an outfielder. I pitched. And that's why I could throw the way I could throw. In other words, I was a guy that probably threw 96, 97 miles an hour. And I was going to pitch. I feel I was going to pitch in the major leagues. And my sophomore year in college, they had somebody else that scouted me, and that was Baltimore. And they tried to sign me before the draft. And I turned it down because they only offered me $17,000. So I said, no, I'm going to get more than that. I'm not going to sign it. And then the draft started. So now I was stuck. I had to stay in school. So.
Well, it's so interesting that you say that. Other guests that we've had that have made it to the major leagues have talked about, or even the collegiate level, the SC experience with Dato sending everybody up to Alaska or sending them to Canada. And the summer leagues were actually really good, very, very competitive. A lot of amazing talent that was there, even though it was just for a short time. What was that like for you, being away from home like that, and literally seeing the moose, and then there's wild geese, and you're in a different part of the world.
Yeah, outside of flying one time to Kansas, because we played Kansas in basketball, it's the only time I'd ever been on a plane as a youngster in college. And the next time is when I took a plane to go to Calgary, Alberta, and I got picked up by a very, very close friend of mine who was a major scout for the Toronto Blue Jays, Wayne Morgan. And he picked me up with his wife there, and we drove all the way from there to Saskatchewan. It's got to be like 20 hours.
Oh my gosh.
20 hours. And so we're in the car, we're talking and everything else. And I knew Wayne because he had played for San Francisco State. And so I knew who he was. And he had talked to me, came up and talked to me when I was in San Jose and said, would you like to come up there? And so I did. And the next morning, it's like, must have been maybe about 8:30 in the morning. They get me out of bed and they said, we're going to play a tournament. And I hadn't had really any sleep, so we're going to go to Unity, Saskatchewan, and play a tournament. 3 games we played that day. All of them 6 innings, and I pitched the first one and played shortstop for the other 2.
Hey, Joe, let me ask you, were you drafted as a pitcher?
I was drafted as a pitcher, but really as an outfielder, as far as the Dodgers were concerned. They were not drafting me as a pitcher. And the reason why is because they had a lot of catchers in the organizations. Most of them couldn't hit, but they could catch. Okay. And what they were looking was somebody that had power, which I did. And so they were looking at me. I didn't know that as basically a power hitter. And I thought I was going to play the outfield until my first spring training, because I went to Tri-Cities, Washington, and I played there with Ron Say and Doyle Alexander. They were and Buckner's brother, Bill Buckner's brother. And so we played there together. And I believe that year I think I had like 11 or 12 home runs in that short league and had about 58 RBIs. And so I think the Dodgers saw me as somebody that could help them power-wise. And so when we went to spring training the following year, I'm starting as an outfielder. I'm playing on a team there. And all of a sudden, Tommy walks up to me and says, Joe, he says, I hear that you're an Italian. And I said, yeah, my mom's Italian. He says, well, maybe that's the reason why I like it. But anyway, he says, I got to talk to you for a few minutes. And Al Campanis was the minor league director then. And he says, we're thinking about making you a catcher. And I said, what? I said, wait a minute. I says, I don't even know how to put the gear on. I says, that's something I've never done. And he says, well, we'll teach you how to do that. And so that's how it started.
That is amazing. You know, one of Lasorda's greatest lines ever, a reporter said to him, you start Ferguson because he's Italian. And Lasorda said, no, that's not true. I start him because I'm Italian.
That's partly true, yeah. It is. So we always, Tommy and I were very close. You guys all know that. We were very close to.
So is he actually the one that converted you to a catcher, Lasorda, would you say?
He did.
Unbelievable. I never, that's why I love these podcasts. I would have never known that in a million years.
Yeah. No, they would, if you remember, I don't know, have you ever been down to Vero Beach? You probably have, right?
No, never been there.
Vero Beach, Dodger Town. They had those big high places where people could stand up there, all the managers and coaches and all the people, and watch all the games going on. There were like 4 fields around them, and so they would get up there and they would watch there. And so I think Tommy was watching me all the time, and he just had this feeling that we really don't have any outfielders that can reach a wall. He says nobody can hit as far as our outfielders. it was a tough time for the Dodgers. They didn't have a good team then. And so I think that's where he got the idea. Why don't we just make him the catcher? Because that was their thing that they did best, is that they trained the player for the position, and whatever position they needed, that's what they did. They just wanted an athlete, and they figured if they had an athlete, they could teach him how to play it.
Hey, Joe, did
Russell became a shortstop.
Yep.
That's how Davey Lopes became a second baseman. That's how Steve Garvey went from third to first.
Yep.
And
Hey,
so,
Joe, did you have any? Did Campanella have anything to do helping you catch?
oh, absolutely, yeah.
That's
He
what
did. Yeah. He was our coach in Vero Beach. He was our coach, and could have been the nicest man in the world. It's a tragedy what happened to him, but he had great knowledge for us, all the catchers. We'd sit around and talk with him and everything, and he was always there all the time. So yeah.
What kind of difference did that make to a young player like you? You're not a teenager, but you're pretty stinking close to just graduating from that. And you see Sandy Koufax or Drysdale or Roy Campanella, some of these amazing, great Hall of Fame and Ring of Honor personalities, and they're all there with a smile on their face going, "Hey, kid, what do you need? I'm here to help you."
Yeah. Well, we were all starstruck. We seen those guys. There's those guys were like people that were, like out of our league. We didn't even think we belonged on the same field with those type of guys. But they were the nicest people. Don Drysdale, Sandy Koufax, Campanella, Erskine. I mean, all these guys were there all the time. And so we had big get-togethers with it, and they all had. Duke Steiner would be there. They'd all get together. They'd talk to us. They'd help us in any way that they could. And so it was nice because it became a family. You felt like it was a big family, unlike the way it is today in baseball.
Yep.
Such thing as that anymore. But that's what it was, and it stayed that way the whole time in my career with the Dodgers. It was always that way.
Well, you start at Tri-City. You spend a day or two in Albuquerque, right? You're just learning to hit. You're learning the game, and then I'm imagining also, Joe, there's a lot of instruction with you either before or after the games because they want you to be fine-tuned to be able to play catcher at the big league level, having never played there before. What was that like for you early on in terms of just learning the job and how to call pitches? And I mean, as a former pitcher, I'm sure you knew a lot more what the pitcher was thinking, but how do you transfer all of that? And then obviously the fundamentals, your footwork, your backhand, your forehand, your catch release, all the things that you need to get better at. What was that like?
Well, it was tough, I can tell you that, because I was supposed to go from Tri-Cities to Albuquerque in AA to play the outfield there. But they felt that it'd be better if I went to Florida and Daytona Beach. And that way I wouldn't, in other words, be such an negative influence on the team in AA, because there was a lot of things that I had to learn. When I started catching, I was so far behind that hitter, every ball was damn near was in the dirt because I was afraid I was going to get hit with a bat. So it was a for me. And
you had to learn to not blink, didn't you? You got to learn to not blink.
And so the catching part, to catch the ball was easy for me. That was not hard. To call the game, that came easy for me. Bob Shaw was my first coach at Daytona Beach. Outstanding pitcher.
Chicago White Sox.
Yep. And mean son of a gun too, boy, I'll tell you. But he was a good guy, and he helped me a lot with as far as calling the game and how to set up hitters and what to look for. But the thing is, he didn't know much about as far as catching and receiving. And so I pretty much struggled. And if I told you that I actually broke Johnny Bench's record in the Florida State League. He had 57 pass balls when he was there, and I had 58. Can you imagine?
Good job, Joe. There you go. Way to break Johnny Bench's record.
Yeah. So that's how bad I was. The next year, I went to AA. Del Crandall was the catcher And it all ended right there. He's the one that taught me how to catch.
Wow.
And I owe a lot to Del Crandall because he's the one that actually transformed me into a really good catcher. And
Wow.
so I appreciated that very, very much.
You know something, Joe? He is underrated because I always say,
Yeah.
because of Campanella in that time period, Del Crandall was the second best catcher in the baseball, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
But Campanella got all the MVPs and everything. But Del Crandall was unbelievable as a catcher.
Yes. Yeah, I played that year in Double A. Steve Yeager was there with me that year. He's younger than me, and so they were basically grooming me to come up to catch. I was going to be the next catcher, and so we played. Let's see, I think we played in minor leagues at then. I think it was like 100 and what was it, 45 games or something like that in the minor leagues. I played 139 games that year. And Yeager caught the other like 6 games, and that was it. And so when that year was over with, they sent me to Puerto Rico to play winter ball. And I played another 60 games in Puerto Rico. And then came back that next year, okay? And that was going to be 1972. And what happened, I probably would have been in the big leagues, but that was a strike year. And so they said, we're not going to bring him to the major leagues. We're not going to use up an option on this guy right now. We're just going to let him go back to AAA. And so I was probably cut short a year because of that, because of the strike.
Wow.
I'm looking at some of your numbers, Joe. In 72, you hit 261 in 123 games, 99 hits in 380 at bats, 10 home runs, 67 RBIs. But you had been called up to the bigs in 70.
Right.
You got a taste of it for a little while. And then 71, you were in Spokane and then with the Dodgers at the end of the year, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And then was it 72 that you really started feeling like I belong up here and I can stay?
Oh, absolutely. But like I said, the strike year happened, and they said, well, we're not going to use an option on this guy right now. So that's what happened to me. Now in 70, it came up because they always used to bring up kids because their season was over, and they'd let you come up and play for the last month, the season in the big leagues. And so I was there for that. I didn't get many at bats, but I was there. And then of course in 72, the strike happened. So when the 72 season was over with, Al Campana said to me, he says, we're going to send you to Caracas, Venezuela, and you're going to play there. That's where I became the hitter that I became. From that, the pitchers that were there pitching in that league were the best pitchers you've ever seen in your life. T-Hop was pitching there. All these guys in major league pitchers were there, and that's where I became a good hitter. And next year, that next spring training, I made the ball club, and I became the number 4 hitter for the Los Angeles Dodgers.
What changed when you were in Venezuela I look at it this way, Joe. Please allow me to go down this rabbit trail with you. Most of your latter career, you had a black bat always, and I knew there's an advantage, especially at night games, where a guy in the outfield can't get the trajectory or the speed or the swing path quite as well if they can't see the bat. That was the early understanding of that. But as big and strong as you were, I always thought you swung a lighter bat than maybe what others would, because you weren't trying to hit home runs. You're just I'm happy with hitting in the gap and getting a double out of that. But I want to get on. You were an average first hitter. I want to put the ball in play. I want to be able to get on base. Is there any truth to that from the way that your plan was when you went up to the plate, or from your standpoint?
No, actually, it wasn't.
Okay.
I was just the opposite of that. I was very selective at the plate. I wanted to get my pitch to hit. I wanted the pitcher to have to get me out with his pitch rather than the other way around. In other words, I knew what my strike zone was, and I stayed there. And I made them pay for it when they threw it there. And I didn't want to go up there and start guessing and trying to look for different pitches. Anything that was up in the strike zone, I hit it. That was a dead high ball hitter. And so a lot of walks in my career, I walked a lot of times because I was patient. And so that was my philosophy at the plate. Uh, uh, when you hit the ball in the ballpark, and they know you're capable of doing that, they're going to try to find a place to pitch you where they can keep you from hitting the ball in the air. And of course, when they pitch me, of course, they're going to pitch me down and away. They're going to try and throw the ball on the outside part of the plate. And so that's what I knew, that from the middle of the plate in, I owned it. Okay. And so I tried to make sure that every time they pitched, I knew exactly where they were going to throw. Because when I got 2 strikes on me, I knew where they were going to try to get me out. And so it helped me in that respect.
Was becoming a catcher, calling a game, and trying to perform with your pitcher that very same tactic to try to get other players to either hit a ground ball or just to get them out, get them out of the way for the next guy? Did that help you rethink the way that you approached at the plate and lead to you becoming a better hitter because of that?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe it might have. I'm not sure. But I did watch hitters real close when they came to the plate. In other words, I noticed where they were in the box. I noticed how they took pitches. Taking a hitter takes a pitch can tell you a lot about what he's actually looking for, okay, or what he's expecting. So in other words, a hitter's going to be up there if he's a fastball hitter. Most hitters are. They're either going to be aggressively looking for a fastball to hit early, or they're going to be a little more passive if they're looking for something that's off speed. Okay, and so you look and see how they start their bat. If they're up there, they're looking for something that's off speed, and you throw them a fastball, their bat never moves. It never moves off their shoulder because they're too passive at the plate. So they're telling you that they're looking for something off speed. I watched the last game the Dodgers played and beat Toronto. I watched that game, and it was very indicative of catchers missing that at home plate, not seeing that and throwing pitches that they had them dead out and would throw the wrong pitch. And so it's
still true today. That philosophy is still true about what you look for as a catcher when you're watching a right-handed batter off your left corner. You watch where he flinches and where he doesn't flinch, depending on the pitch. And now you got to store that. You have a book, right? Joe Ferguson has a book on the Reds, on the Astros, on the Mets, on everybody. And you got to remember that, because there's going to be a guy that switches to a different team, and all of that needs. I mean, your recall has to be instantaneous, and it has to be correct in a way where you're watching and learning for things every time you're up, every time you're on the field, aren't you?
Now you got to remember every hitter, what they do, especially the ones that start every day. You have to know everything they do, and of course you got to match that against the pitcher. Pitcher sometimes doesn't match well against a hitter. In other words, you have to find a way to make him be able to get a hitter out. And sometimes it's not as easy as some of them like to rear back and throw it 99 miles an hour. You don't always have that as a pitcher, so you got to figure out how you're going to get this hitter out with the stuff that he has. But like I said before, how they take a pitch is the primary way that you tell what a hitter is up there looking for. Okay, and you can freeze a hitter so easily by how you pitch and where you pitch, up in the strike zone, down. In other words, showing him changing his eye level, okay, and then freezing him, particularly with a fastball away, especially in a 2-2 count. Because you've already thrown 4 pitches, you probably had a breaking ball in there. And if you've got 2 strikes on it, you're going to run it to 2-2. Sometimes that fastball on the outside part of the plate just freezes the hitter.
It's amazing. We had Reggie Smith on last week when he was with the Cardinals. He was playing first base once, and McCarver didn't want to go and tell Bob Gibson what to do. So the guys in the dugout said, "Hey, Reggie, you go tell Bob. Reggie, I'm not going out there. Did you ever have an intimidation factor, especially early on in your career, to go out and talk to Jim Brewer or I'm saying, but Bill Singer, or I've got a picture here of you and Don Sutton out there right now, or did it go pretty well for you, pretty much with everybody? Hey, you're just trying to help him get the next guy out.
Well, when I was young, when I was first starting, yeah, because we had Osteen pitching, we had Downing pitching, we had guys that were basically sinker ball pitchers. The only real hard throwers that we had was Messersmith and Don Sutton. The guy that was toughest to talk, the other ones were not.
Mike Marshall.
Mike Marshall, yeah, Mike was a pretty stubborn guy, and he had his own way of doing things. But Messersmith, you couldn't talk to him at all. He was going to pitch his own game. Don Sutton was the same way, and so you had to figure out what Don Sutton wanted to pitch, what pitch he wanted to throw, because otherwise he was going to shake you off. And I would rather do that than him trying to shake off all the time and make it tougher for him to pitch. Because if the pitcher can just get the signal and pitch, he's going to be better off. And so,
hey, Joe, I got a question for you. You caught Mike Marshall the year he won the Cy Young Award, and that's still a record to this day, 104 games, and he never wore long sleeves. And tell me this, was he one of the – I happen to have the pleasure of knowing Mike, one of the greatest I like characters. One of the greatest characters. Am I right? One of the greatest characters.
Yeah. He was a good guy. I mean, he's a good teammate.
Absolutely.
But he always had to have the ball. You had to give him the ball. He would call down to the dugout, and he'd call Walt Dawson or Red Adams, and he'd say, "I got to come in today. I got to pitch." And so there'd be someone with a shutout or something, and they'd have to come out of the game so that he could pitch the ninth inning. Literally. I mean, he did the same thing in Montreal. He pitched over 100 games in Montreal too. So that's the type of pitcher that he was. But he was a good teammate.
Oh yeah.
The funny thing about it, he had these books. Very studious guy, very smart, very intelligent, and he had these books. And we once in a while we'd get there early and we'd look through these books and how he would pitch the guys. And he would say, "Well, the ball was hit off the wall, but I think the hitter he must have known what was happening, where I was going to pitch him, because he wasn't supposed to hit that pitch." So he was like fooling himself because he thought he was that good that nobody could hit him. So
nobody, yeah.
Interesting guy.
Any experiences? My neighbor is Jay Howell, and in the '88 World Series, Jay was in the bullpen when Kirk Gibson was hitting the home run that kind of rocked the world a little bit. And I will tease Jay every now and then. There are times where he would be coming in from the bullpen, and you got the jacket. Remember back then they had that little silk jacket that they had to bring in with them. It's ridiculous how that worked. But he came in from right field when he was with the Braves, and Mark Lemke was the second baseman. And Jay had to walk right by Lemmer, and Mark says to him, he goes, "You better get the ball in the air, because if it's in the ground, I swear I'm going to throw one into the stands. My arm is gone." He goes, "Your arm is gone. My arm is gone. I can't throw today. My arm is jello. I can't do anything like that." And they were bickering with one another about how bad it was. Did you ever have any goofy stories like that where you get on the mound and you're just talking and Lasorda says something funny, or Say comes over and tells a joke, or you're waiting for your pitcher to come in and he goes, "Man, I don't have it today. Just give me everything low and away. I'm just going to make ground balls and put Garvey to work."
Yeah. Well, the thing is, most of the time that there wasn't much said, but there's been some times, if you remember, we're playing in the World Series against the Yankees and Doug Rau was pitching. You remember that? Or was it the Yankees or Oakland?
Second or third inning, and Lasorda comes out, and there were a couple of beeps back in the day when you couldn't say certain things, and it was a pretty rowdy. Doug Rau, of course, I'll pick another word. It was very aggressive between Tommy and Doug. He didn't want to come out of the game.
No, he did not want to come out of the game, and so Tommy goes out there and he says, Dougie says, he'd got a couple. There were a couple of blue pits and everything else. They weren't hitting apart, but they were scoring runs. I mean, he just wanted to change. He just wanted to change the momentum of the game. So Tommy says, "That's it." And I mean, he was pissed off and everything. So he gets back in the dugout. They're still arguing. But Tommy, he says to Tommy, he says, they're not hitting it hard, Tommy. He says, yeah, but they're scoring runs and you're gone. That's it. It's over with. So he goes back in the dugout and they're screaming at each other and everything else. And so finally, Tommy just says, Dougie, you say another word, I swear to God, we're going to get a fight right in the dugout. And I don't want to do that because that's not going to look good. So just go sit down, go upstairs. That's it. I don't want to talk to you ever again. That's it. So that stuff does happen. But what used to happen is if I were catching and Tommy was going to take a player out, in the dugout, he would look at me as I'm catching, and he would signal. I would signal to him whether or not maybe you should go out to the mound. Okay, I'd give him a little signal, so he'd walk out there. And so I positioned myself like if he was going to take out Sutton, I would position myself. Tommy would be right in front of him, and I would get just slightly behind him. And he would say to Don, he'd say, how do you feel? And what do you think Don's going to say? He says,
I feel great.
I feel great. And so I'd sit back there and I'd go like this. I'd start shaking my head. No, he's not. I'd see Tommy and say, you know what? That's enough. He says, we're going to make a change. So that way, he never had to worry about the catcher didn't like me. Because if I did that, if I showed that, then he wouldn't want me to catch him anymore. So that's how you can help not only the pitcher, the team, and also the manager of the team. Because sometimes they don't actually know either if that's the right decision. But all they need is maybe just a little nudge. And I'm sure that a lot of catchers did that. Brody did that, I'm sure. Bench did that. All these guys did that. And they would help that manager to make that decision.
Well, speaking of that, some of the other catchers in the National League, I've got a few pictures. Manny Sanguillen, you've got Bench, of course. Duffy Dyer was just getting started.
Yeah.
Tim McCarver was still in the league back in those days. I mean, some really good catchers. Was that a motivation for you to try to work your way to be the all-star status? And, I'm going to watch what these guys do and kind of see what their skill set is that's different from mine, but kind of apply the really good things that they do to my game so that I play better, and I'm a guy that is improving and hopefully gets to that all-star level very quickly.
Yeah, I watched other players. There's no doubt about that. You can pick something up by watching other players, especially if it's a catcher. You're watching to see what they do behind home plate, how they set up. You see when they go to the plate to hit, what type of hitter they are. Now, Sanguillen, the Pittsburgh Pirates, all of them use those big bats. They were all using, at that time, there were about 6 or 7 guys in that team that were using bats that were 37 ounces, 37 inches and 37 ounces. That's a big bat.
Yeah.
And so, but they could use that. They hit with those bats. And so, I mean, the biggest bat that I ever used, I used 35 inches. That's the longest I used. But my bat was 35 ounces. Never went to 37 or 36 or anything, but it was 35 ounces. And so,
you swung a 35-35. That's a big stick now.
Yeah, 35-35.
Hey, Joe, I have one of your bats right here in my office. It's an Adirondack. You use it.
Yeah, I didn't use many of those. I didn't use that for very long. That was probably very early in my career using that bat because I went to the black bat very soon after that. And I don't know why I did. I think maybe just I liked the way it looked, so that's why I used it. But I used it very thin. I used an S2. It was a small barrel bat.
That's what Ernie Banks used.
Very compact barrel. You want to have those because it comes off the bat. It has a different sound when it comes off the bat, and so it's more compact. So that's what I use. And the interesting thing when I was up there in '71, Dick Allen had come to the ball club. He was playing, and when I went in Vero Beach I was the first one to be to the in the clubhouse, and he was right next to me because of his number, and I picked up one of his bats and I couldn't believe it. It almost hit the ground when I picked it up. He used a 42-ounce bat, 36-42, from the day he started until the day he quit. The same bat. He
Wow.
swung it like it was a toothpick.
Yeah, feats of strength, right? There's in four. We talked about Hank a little bit earlier. Willie Mays. It was guys that had such amazing strength. Now
Yep.
they didn't hit it. They didn't hit it 500 feet, but if they needed to hit it 375, they could hit it 382. Right? They could just clear the fence and make sure that that's all you needed. I don't need to hit it 500 to get all four bases. I earned it.
They hit line drives. That's what they did. Hank hit nothing but line drives. Mays was the same way. They didn't hit it way up in the air because they had different swings. They had different swings. Most of them were swings went from the top, okay, and through the ball. Similar to like you see a guy like Betts swinging. His a very level swing. And so most of the time it was just line drives that they were hitting. But they had tremendous strength, tremendous hand strength. Okay, big hands. And so they could swing that bat. They had tremendous bat speed. And so that's what would drive it out of the ballpark.
Yeah, I got to tell you, we were talking about Richie Allen. This is a funny story, I got to tell you. Al the Bull Ferrara, who you knew, Joe, another Italian, one of my favorite characters. Anyway, he told us one time, he said he broke his leg and he was on crutches. So he was sitting in the dugout boxes. And he went in to see Jim Mew in the visiting clubhouse, and Alan was the Phillies.
There's a name.
Jim Mew. Anyway, so Alan came in right before the game. He was drunk. He'd been drinking all day. Richie Allen, and he and Al went to the racetrack for years and years and years. They're horse race buddies. But anyway, what a sweetheart of a guy Richie was too. But anyway, so the Bull said, "Bob, I was going to leave, but I wanted to stay just to see what he was going to do because he'd been drinking." So he said, he swore to God he'd never seen anything like it. He said he was in the dugout boxes and Allen came to bat and Bill Singer was pitching. And this is after he'd been drinking all day and came to the park 10 minutes before the game started. He said he hit a line shot over Bill Singer's head that was never more than 6 feet off the ground that hit the center field fence and bounced back. He got a double. And he said, the guy was hammered, and like Joe said, he used a telephone pole as a bat. But that is one of the funniest stories I've ever heard. And to hear Al tell the story was hilarious.
He was drunk every day. Yeah. You know what? The little story. He never got even out there in time to even do the they'd have the national anthem. He'd be running down the runway, okay, as they're playing the national anthem. He never took batting practice. He just showed up and he hit. That's it.
Yep.
He did that his whole career. And the thing is, he was built like an Adonis. You know what I mean? This guy was like cut, chiseled. But again, like I said, big hands, strong, great bat speed, and a super guy, very very good guy.
Great.
That's why Walt Olson pleaded to have him traded. He didn't want him on the team anymore because of that. And so they traded him that winter. They traded him.
Yeah.
And they asked Tommy when Tommy became the manager, how would you have treated Dick Allen? He says, you know what I'd have done? I'd have put a bottle of scotch in his locker and said, have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow. That's it. It's unusual for players back then to do that.
If it's not broke, don't fix it, right? If the players love him, and obviously for certain reasons, yes, it's not good, but it was a different era back then. You know the story about Mickey Mantle. He had been out all night with all the reporters. He comes back the next day, the 8th inning. He hits a go-ahead home run. The Yankees win the ball game. At the end of the game, there's Scoop and Bob and the other guy and Fred, and they all have press in their fedora hats written out the side. And Mickey, how'd you do it? Nod, nod, wink, wink. They knew he'd been out all night. And he goes, oh, it's easy, guys. I saw all 3 balls coming at me, and I swung at the one in the middle, and I hit that one out of the park.
I believe it. I believe it.
It's just.
I don't know. They're just incredible athletes. What can you say?
Yeah.
And,
well, you were around a lot of incredible athletes, and Bob mentioned this at the beginning of the show. Guys that didn't end up making it. Jim Lefevre, Ken McMullen was sent down. He went to Bob and played for the Angels.
Yeah.
Buckner was new. Lopes, Garvey, Say, Russell, Bill Sudeikis, Billy Grabarkowitz was sent down. Willie Crawford was moved over. That you became very young, very quick in the early 70s, but because you got playing time, you guys matured at a different level than what others would as a group, and it turns into 1974. What a year.
Yeah, they wanted Sudeikis to be a catcher too. They tried with that, and it didn't work. And they just felt he'd be better maybe at third base. But they tried everybody everywhere. That's what the Dodgers did. They just, whatever, they would just find a position, try to find a position for someone that worked, especially if they could hit. And if you didn't hit, then it didn't make that much difference. But if you could hit, they'd find somewhere for you to play.
Hey, Joe, when Lasorda said to you you mentioned catching, was he a scout then or was he a coach?
He was coaching the Pioneer League.
He was a what?
He was managing in the Pioneer League.
Yeah. I got a whole new perspective.
When I came into the organization,
That's
he was up there with Bobby Valentine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I forgot Bobby Valentine. Yeah, another one of the guys that was there during that early portion of his career. And you're all young. You're all very, very talented. You're high draft picks, or you've been scouted, and all at the same time. So it was a tough 70, 71, 72, maybe even 73. The Reds were who they were, but in 74, you guys, you became a different unit, didn't you? Yeah. You added Messerschmitt. Bert Hooton wasn't there yet, but you had Rao, you had Sutton, you had Charlie Huff was part of that, and Mike Marshall, of course. You mentioned him earlier. Go ahead.
Charlie was the reliever, and you had Brewer too. And so that's what used to come out of the bullpen. So, and Pete Mickelson. Had the greatest sinker and palm ball I have ever seen in my life. It was amazing, this guy. I can remember pitching in Cincinnati. He had the bases loaded. He came in with the bases loaded. And I don't remember where the starter was. He came with the bases loaded, and then I'm catching. And Johnny Bench is the hitter. And he's got a 3-2 count on Johnny Bench, and the base loaded. If he walks the run in, then the game's over. He threw him a palm ball, and I think Johnny Bench must have swung 3 times before it got there. I mean, it was incredible. When I would most of the time when I was young, I'd spend most of my time in the bullpen because I was just warming up pitchers down there, and I'd say, you know what? If these guys are relievers, what do the starters pitch like? I was scared to death that if I ever had to play a game, I was going to have to hit against starters, and I knew I couldn't even hit the relievers. So I mean, I was like a newbie. I didn't have much confidence in myself when I first got to the big league as far as a hitter. And so that's something you learn as you get experience. But if you don't have a chance to play, you can't. You don't believe in yourself.
Hey, Joe, I got a question for you.
Yeah.
I asked Darrell Evans, who played 21 years in the big leagues once, who was the most intimidating pitcher he ever faced? I thought he'd say Nolan Ryan or something. You know what he said? J.R. Richard. But I want to ask you, who was the most intimidating pitcher you ever batted against?
J.R. Richards, and I caught him too. Nobody's even close to him.
Yep.
He beat in one stretch, and I was playing then too. He beat the Dodgers 13 straight times.
Wow.
No chance. We had guys that wouldn't even play. Reggie wouldn't play. Russell wouldn't play. Lopes wouldn't play. He said, I can't hit the guy. Play somebody else. So he was incredible.
Yeah.
And when I got to catch him, I knew I could understand why.
Oh, you caught him. That's right. In Houston, you caught him.
I caught him for 2 years.
Wow.
2 years there. And when he would, his fastball averaged about probably somewhere between 99 and 101. He had a breaking ball that in essence was a curveball. But the way he threw it was a slider, but he threw so far up on top, it just went absolutely straight down. And you couldn't tell the difference between the two pitches. And so here you are trying to hit a ball up in the strike zone, and then all of a sudden there's a ball that's in the dirt, and you couldn't identify either one of the pitches, and he just ate everybody alive. The best team, Cincinnati, Giants, everybody, they could not hit him.
Couldn't hit him. Yeah.
Could not hit him.
He's what, 6'7", and he had a real long stride. So basically, the ball was about a foot and a half out in front of the plate by the time he let go of it, and you don't have any time, right? It was just an optical, not an illusion, but an optical oddity that most righties couldn't figure that out in enough time to be able to make the correction and put the bat on the ball.
He was 6'9", and the thing about it, he was even tougher on left-handers than he was on right-handers.
Oh,
You
wow.
had half a chance as a right-hander, but as a left-hander, you had no chance because he'd bury that breaking ball down by their ankle, and they couldn't tell the difference. Reggie couldn't hit him, not at all. He couldn't touch him. So he was a freak guy. When he started out, he was with the Giants, if you remember, and they traded him because he was so wild, they were afraid someone was going to get killed. Because you had a better chance of standing right on top of home plate than standing in the batter's box.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
Really, I mean, that's how wild he was. And
Yeah.
the Giants traded him. Then, then after that, the guy that actually helped him a lot was the pitching coach there at Houston, who actually became the pitching coach for the Angels, if you remember, when Ryan got there. And he did the same thing with Ryan. So, because Ryan, the Mets had him, and they got rid of him too because they felt that he was not going to be able to be a starter. And
he was a rookie on that '69 Miracle team that wins the World Series, but they did not activate him in the playoffs because he couldn't throw strikes, right?
Well, he did. Yeah, he pitched. He pitched in the World Series, and as a matter of fact, he pitched about 4 innings to win a game in the World Series. They just left him in there, and nobody could hit him, and they won that game. He was very, very a big reason why they won the World Series. But for some reason, they didn't feel like he would ever become a starter. They were starter-oriented, the Mets, not reliever-oriented. And so they traded him to the Angels.
It was Tom Morgan, the coach you were talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he got to Ryan. He straightened him out.
Mm-hmm.
He got him to have control of his stride, his body. In other words, Ryan used to kind of fall to the left when he'd throw. He'd fall over himself. He got him to play. He got him to throw so that he could throw a baseball and actually be facing with both feet looking right at the hitter. And once he did that, it was over with. And
he just needed some development, and when he got it, it's look out, right? Look out, man.
What a good coach could do for you, hitting coach or pitching coach could do for you, because they know how the body works. They've done it. They were pitchers themselves or hitters themselves, so they know how the body works. And if you kind of understand the physics that's going on there, then you can really become a very good coach and help the players that you're working with.
Joe, take me through the 72 season. I'm sorry, the 74 season real quick. When it starts out, we mentioned a little bit earlier, you're in Atlanta, the second series of the ball game. When did you get a feeling that you knew this? I mean, you lose this one game, but it's game 4 of the season. It was really early in the year.
Yes.
When did you start getting a feeling that I'm not watching the standings and where we are there? I'm just watching the way we're playing against some of these other clubs, and we're beating them, and we're doing it quite easily. When did you get a feel that the team was good enough that we might win the division and do something that the Dodgers haven't done in a few years?
Well, I knew that we had a good ball club because we had done so well in '73. So I knew that we could compete with anybody there was in baseball, no doubt about that. But the thing is, we got off to a good start, and of course that always helps. And then we went on from there. We kind of just overtook everybody. There was nobody that was going to challenge us in 1974. So, and basically it was the same players, because we had the same players in '73 that we had in '74. And so, interesting thing, story, Steve Garvey, in '73, in that winter, almost got traded. He almost got traded to Atlanta, and I think Cam Pettis stopped it because that's what the talk was. Because he really didn't have a position because he couldn't throw well, and so
Right.
they didn't know what to do with him because Buckner was at first base and Steve was playing third base, and Steve couldn't throw the ball across the diamond too well. Okay, so they didn't know what to do with him, and so he almost got traded. And then what happened? They decided that they would put Buckner in left field, okay, and move Steve over to first base, and that's where he ended up, and that's where he became an outstanding player. Now he never threw the ball well, okay, but he could pick the ball out of the dirt as good as anybody, and so everyone felt like, well, he's not a big guy, Steve. He's a short guy. They thought, well, he's not gonna be able to play this position well either, but he did. He played very well. He was an outstanding first baseman.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because Buckner, obviously, as a left-hander, would be a more natural first baseman.
Right.
Bill could run early. Later on in his career, he just, I think he pulled a hamstring or his SI started acting up, and he couldn't move either very well. So he went to first base, and everyone remembers what happened when he was with the Red Sox. But he was your left fielder.
Yes.
And the way that the rotation, you put Say can hit, put him at third, move Garvey over. It worked, didn't it? I mean, that infield played together longer than any other in Major League history.
Absolutely.
So it was actually a good decision, not for Bill Buckner, but it was a great decision for the organization. And that infield was one that you were there. You were a part of it for so many of those years.
Yep. Ron Say was the third, and Ronnie played pretty much even with the bat because he didn't have a great arm, but he played even with the bat, and you couldn't hit a ball through him if you shot it out of a cannon. Okay, you caught everything he could get to, and he threw it accurately to first base. Billy Russell, who had been a center fielder, was the shortstop, and he worked really hard to become a very good shortstop. And Davey Lopes did the same thing because they were both center fielders when they started, just like Valentine was. And so they became excellent infielders. And like I said, because we had played together in '73, '74, we felt that we had a good shot at winning.
Yeah, and that turned out real well. You're in the World Series, obviously. It didn't go very well. The A's beat you, and that was the third of their three-peat, so to speak. But obviously the play, Bob spoke about this earlier. I did find this shot of you literally going ahead. Now, you're probably 4 or 5 inches taller than Jimmy Wynn anyways. Jimmy kind of moved his arm out, right? Tell you what, set this up, right? There's a runner on third. This is game 1 of the World Series. It's a day game. What was it, about a 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock start time? The sun is bright. Go ahead. You tell us, Joe. What was this like for you?
Well, remember, early on, about halfway through the year, Jimmy Wynn hurt his arm. He couldn't throw anymore. And so what it did that year is that we had to run either Davey Lopes or Billy Russell out towards him, and he would just toss it to them, and then they would make the throws. And they both had great arms. So basically, they became like long guys, cutoff men. And so before the game started, I went to Jimmy and I said, Jimmy, because he knew I was playing right field that day. And I says, I'll take everything I can get to. If I get to it, I said, will you hear me calling? That just makes you just kind of get out of the way so I can catch the ball. And so that's how this thing developed. Now I'm in dead right field and this is dead center field. The reason why I think I had enough time to do there is because Reggie Jackson hit the ball and he hit it real high in the air. So I think I had enough time. I felt I had enough time to get there. And so I started. It shows that I'm right next to him, but actually I was behind him coming in. And I was telling him, I got it, I got it, I got it. And so he just kind of bent down and got his hands out of the way because he knew I was coming. And then from there, I threw the ball and I got lucky. It ended up in the right place.
There's a quote that I read that you said that your sunglasses that you were wearing were dangling funnily in the way of your eye. You didn't even get to see the throw, did you?
No, I never even saw what happened at home plate. All I did is I just took it and threw it as hard as I could throw it in the air, right on the line, all the way to home plate. And like I said, to be able to throw it and be in the right place, okay, at the right time, there's a lot of luck in that. I mean,
Oh yeah.
you know, it's just something that just was fortunate that I could do that. And Steve got knocked down pretty good because I think Bando was the guy at third base. He thought he was going to score easy. He was going to just like run the home plate and tag it and go in the dugout. All of a sudden, he sees Jaeger with the ball and he just runs into him. So that's how that happened.
You say there may be a lot of luck in it. No, you got to have a gun to make that luck.
You have to be able to throw it there. You got to get it there, and you got to get it there. You can't let it skip. It's got to go in the air all the way. So.
And you do. Now, was there a part of you that once you heard the crowd react, you go, something good must have happened, even though you didn't get a chance to see it?
I knew he was out, yeah. But I didn't actually see the actual play.
Wow.
Well, the series itself goes.
Bob, I knew I could throw the ball, and that was not hard for me to do that. I mean, I could throw the ball out of the ballpark, stand at home plate, throw out of the ballpark in center field. It's not that I couldn't do it. It's just it's got to be right, perfect, or it's not going to happen. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're going back on that one, as opposed to catching it and coming forward and going from left to right, quote unquote, in the direction that you were, or if it's off just a little bit, the play's different. If you had a faster runner at third base, Bando wasn't the fastest guy, but obviously one of the great plays. And as I mentioned at the beginning, folks that are listening here, Joe Ferguson was a part of two of baseball historical. Not just for 1974, but for history of baseball, with Hank Aaron's home run earlier that same year, and then obviously making one of the greatest throws to get a runner out in World Series history. Pat yourself on the back, Joe. It's good to be in the right place at the right time, isn't it?
Yeah, thank you very much.
You're welcome. And then you hit a home run in game 2. You win that. That's the only game that the Dodgers won. Thank goodness you didn't get swept at home there early, but unfortunately, you didn't get to come back. You had the home field advantage, but you didn't get to come back to Dodger Stadium.
No, we did not. And that was, the home run I hit was off of Vita Blue.
Who was it off of?
Vita Blue.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and Vita Blue, he was a 96, 97 mile an hour guy too. But he was a high ball pitcher. He was right in my zone for me. And the first at bat, it came later. My first at bat, I flew out at the warning track in left center, and the second one was on the warning track in right center, and the third one was right down the middle of the center field over the fence. So
wow.
And if you remember, Tommy was mic'd up at that time. Do you remember hearing that? Have you ever heard Tommy? He was mic'd up when I was at the plate in that third at bat. And he was calling to me, come on, Fergie, come on, Fergie. He says, you can do it. Come on, you can do it. He makes a pitch, and he goes, you could hear him going, whoa, watch out, because they had him mic'd up. And the next pitch, he threw it, a fastball away from me, and I hit it out of the ballpark. So, and I guess that's me coming into the dugout, right?
Yeah, that's right after that happened. The game 2 highlight. I was a card collector back in the days. I would never put them in the spokes of my bicycle. Never. I just never knew anyone that did that, but that was obviously a thing to do. But I still have some of my cards, and that as soon as I saw this, I go, I've got this, or at least I had it. I had several of them there. And unfortunately, there were 4 others, and each one of them had something where the A's were doing something great, and they were winning the ball game. I think it was Joe Rudy jumping up in the air for Game 5 that made the card there for tops.
Yeah, Oakland was a very, very, very talented, very, very good ball club, but they were really a veteran ball club. They had played together for a long time, and I think that's what they had a slight edge on us just in that way, because being that it was going to be our first World Series, okay, I think that we maybe played maybe a little outside ourselves because of that. But they played differently. They had great confidence in themselves, and they made good decisions, and they made, they did the things that they needed to win. So
They did have the ugliest uniforms in the world up to that point, didn't they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
They always wore the white pants, whether they were at home or on the road. But my gosh, the yellow, the green, the white, didn't like those either. But even though that was okay, those were Sunday whites were different. But I'm teasing, of course. It doesn't matter when you're winning 3 World Series in a row. You great pitching, and then they fell apart. Right, things started breaking apart for them financially, where Finley didn't want to do anything to keep the team together. He just let Bando go, Rudy goes, Gene Tennis goes, Raleigh Fingers goes, Catfish was the first to go, Reggie goes. Before you know it, the only one that was left was Vita Blue.
Yeah, because he wasn't going to pay. That he wasn't going to pay the money. So, and then plus free agency was upon him. So that was a problem. And he wasn't going to pay the money to keep that team together. So. And that's the way the owners were then, because they didn't feel that they felt that what they had, that they were going to be able to keep these players forever. And that's why the strike happened. And that's when Marvin Miller became the savior of all the players.
Hey, Harper, I want to tell you a funny story.
Please.
I found this out later, but there was one of the greatest characters, Dato. I was good friends with Tim Rosevich, who was an All-American football player with O.J. Simpson, and he played in the Pro Bowl for the Philadelphia Eagles, a badass linebacker. He used to eat glass. He would light himself on fire. He would pull fish out of ponds and chew them up and eat them. One day, Dato gets me in, where Dato's house was right by the Rose Bowl, and he gives me and Rosevich tickets to go to the Rose Bowl game. So I'm sitting right next to him. And there's a couple in front of us, a husband and wife, SC grads, very classy people. And as we're sitting there, he reaches up and unsnaps the woman's bra and sitting in front of us. Okay, this is Tim. So this guy was like whacked out, okay? So one of my greatest stories is one day was Halloween. I will never forget it. I don't drink, and I haven't. This is one of the reasons. It was Halloween. Justin, Joe Ferguson, myself, and I think Rosevich was with us, went out and drank all. I can barely remember what happened, except we had a great time. I can tell you that.
Yes,
but go on and tell them the story about Tim Rosevich.
Okay. Well, first of all, Tim had a very, very tough background with his dad. We went to school together when I was in grammar school, and I had moved. My parents had a restaurant, and I was going to go to school in Mountain View, but ended up having to go to a school there in Mountain View, Springer, because we had to drive every day from Palo Alto there, and so they just decided that I would just go to that school. It would be easier, and so I'm going to this school. I think I'm in the 4th grade, and Tim Rosevich is going to that school at the same time. And the first day at school, I come there. We had a coach, a PE coach. And when it was time for us to do our PE, you had to go run around the whole field. And when you ran around the whole field, then you would start your activity after that, whatever it was going to be, baseball, whatever. And so I just took off because I was just a little guy. And so I took off and started running as fast as I could. And all of a sudden, I noticed that everyone was behind me. And I looked back and I saw them coming when I finished. And Tim Rosevich came up to me and says, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm running the lap." And he goes, "Well, you're not supposed to run the lap. The lap you have to run is the one behind me, because I'm the one that's supposed to win." And I said, "Oh, really?" Because I was a little shit too when I was young. And I said, "Oh, really?" And he goes, "Yeah." And he says, "And believe me, you're going to pay for it." And I said, "Okay, fine, I'm going to pay for it." So I go to school, the school ends. That day, come out of the class, I get outside, I'm walking, and there was only one way to go, one way exit out of that school. And I'm walking, and all the kids are standing around Rosovich. And I'm going, what the heck is going on? So I go down there, and he says, now you're going to pay for it. And I says, pay for what? And he says, for running in front of me. And so I said, okay, go for it. He takes a swing, I duck, I get behind him, I jump on top of him, okay? I put my legs around him, my arms around his neck, and I'm squeezing as hard as I can, okay? And finally he says, I give. And then from that point on, we're the best of friends.
Well, I mean, and to further, he was one of the meanest, toughest fighters.
Exactly.
He had a reputation. Nobody would mess with this guy. That's a great story. But I'm in the night watch bar one night drunk, and Rosovich came up. I didn't know it was Rosovich at the time. Came up and tried to hit on my girlfriend. So I go up to him and say, keep your effing hands off my girlfriend. If I'd known it was Rosovich, I'd have ran out the door. But and he goes, oh, I'm sorry, which was hilarious because he would have tore me apart. I mean, the guy was like, that's a great story about you and him, Joe. I mean, this guy, you got
now the story. This is how it evolves. Now you got to remember that now I am coaching for Tommy, and we're going to go see a USC game. Justin's there. I'm with him. I don't know if you were there, Bob. You might have been there.
I think so, yeah.
And Rosovich is walking through the restaurant. You know where it was, that big restaurant.
Julie's.
Yeah. And so he's walking through there, and I said, Justin, I said, that's Tim Rosovich. Tell Tim I want to talk to him. And he goes, okay. So he goes over there and says, hey, Tim, I want you to meet somebody. So he brings him over to the table. And he goes, he looks at me and he goes, who are you? And I says, Joe Ferguson. He says, you're Joe Ferguson? He says, well, I know who you are. You played for the Dodgers. I said, that's right. He says, what are you doing? I said, I'm coaching for Tommy. And I said, that's good. So we're talking, bullshitting and everything. And all of a sudden he goes, I go, Tim, you don't remember me? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, you know, we went to school together. And he says, we did? He said, yeah, remember Springer School? Remember the first day I was there, we got in a fight? And he says, that's you? He says, that's the Joe Ferguson you are now? And I said, yeah. And I'll be a son of a gun. Tears are running down his face. He's crying.
I remember that.
He's crying. And he can't get over it. And that's because of what happened through his childhood. It was terrible. His father just used to beat the holy hell out of him. Every time. He had to have 2 feet, 1 shoe. And I'm sure that had a lot to do with the behaviors that we all saw in him.
But deep down, he was a beautiful person. Don't you agree?
Good guy. He'd do anything for you. Anything. So it was sad. For me, that was really sad to see that.
Yeah.
Well, you got to develop a lot of really amazing relationships because of baseball.
Yes.
Your ability to play it at the highest level. And many of those are still intact today, I'm sure. Just because you were there at the same time. Hey, remember this, remember that, and getting to share things like that. Do you stay busy with a lot of guys? Do you go to a lot of the alumni events or the former player things? What keeps you busy now, Joe?
No, I don't go nowhere. As a matter of fact, I don't have anything to do with the Dodgers anymore whatsoever. It's a whole different organization. I'm not a fan of theirs. I love the players. The players are great.
Yeah.
But the people that own that ball club, I can't stand them. And my agent is basically the same way. Now he has some obligations to guys that are there, that are still there, and so he needs to kind of bite his tongue a little bit. But he's got the same feelings I do about them. They're just not good. They're a cheap organization, and they don't help anybody. They treat their legends, the people that have played there for many years, they treat them like crap. And so I just don't have anything to do with them. They don't call me, and if they do call me, I'm not going to answer.
Interesting. There's a lot of bad business that goes on in the league, and you always want it to be from another team's standpoint, not yours. And when you look at the success of the organization with the 9 World Series titles now, to hear stuff like that, especially out of a city and a team that has meant so much to so many for such a long time. It's not the Yankee organization. Don't get me wrong. They've got 28 championships. They treat their guys kid glove, if you ask me. I know some people that are a part of the organization in many different ways, and they say we're the class of the league. Everybody is behind us when it comes to how we treat our own.
Yes.
Bob, you know this. Once a Raider, always a Raider. There's a certain class that football has, and there's some that don't have it. So share a little bit. Obviously, the organization from a player's standpoint changed for you. What was it, 76, when you ended up going to St. Louis, and then you were in Houston for a few years. You go back to the Dodgers, and then you end up in California. What was that like for you in terms of your love for the game, knowing that you could be traded at any time?
Well, when I got traded in '76, I had broke my arm in '75 and missed the rest of the season. It was a terrible injury, and so I missed the rest of the whole '75 season. In '76, when I started, it still had not healed properly. I couldn't reach a warning track when I hit, and so they decided they were going to make a trade, and the trade was for Reggie Smith. We both got traded. He got traded to the Dodgers, and I went to St. Louis Cardinals.
How did you break your arm, Joe? How did that happen?
We had a big fight, in '75 with San Diego, and I broke my arm in that fight. And it was probably the dumbest thing I ever did in my whole career. I wish I had never done it, but it took away a lot of time from me. I probably lost almost a year and a half of real playing time. So,
wow.
But I can't do anything about it now. But problem is when I got traded, I felt like the Dodgers had done something, mistreated me to a point, because I had done some really good things for them, and they just said, we're just going to get rid of the guy. And so I went to St. Louis. When I got to St. Louis, I actually started, after a couple of games, I started to hit the ball a lot better. I was going to be the catcher there. They put Ted Simmons at first base, and then played about maybe 10 games. And Red Shanians was the manager. He comes to me one day and he says, Bergie, it gets really hot here. And he says, maybe you should take a day off. And I said, I don't need a day off. And he goes, yeah, you need to it's hot. Just take the day off. And I said, I don't want a day off. And so he says, no, you're going to take the day off. And so I didn't play for the next 2 weeks. And I said, what the heck's going on? So I went up to Big Divine. He was the general manager. I said, what's going on? He says, well, Ted Simmons says he doesn't want to be first baseman. He wants to be the catcher. So that was pretty much the end of me playing with the St. Louis Cardinals. Now they tried to get to sign me, and can keep me there so that they can say, well, we can put him in the outfield. We'll play him, and you can become the regular outfielder. I says, I'm a catcher. So either I'm going to be a catcher for the St. Louis Cardinals, or I'm going to be a catcher somewhere else. And they traded me to Houston. And I went to Houston, and I did very well. I had a really good first year with them. And then the second year, I started the year, and then all of a sudden, unbeknownst to anybody else, Tommy Lasorda gave me a call in about somewhere around the end of June. It said, he says, are you okay? Are you healthy? Because I had gotten an injury with my shoulder, dislocated my shoulder. And he says, I'm healthy now. And he goes, good, I'm going to tell Al Campanis. And Al made a trade for me with Tal Smith. And I got traded back to the Dodgers. Now, the interesting thing is, that day, I took a plane and I flew to Cincinnati. The Dodgers were playing Cincinnati, and I flew. I come in, and we're all saying hi to each other, and it's like about the third or fourth inning. I put my bag down, and I sit down on the bench, and believe it or not, Steve Yeager was catching. He got hit and broke his hand, and I'm putting the game for him. I played almost the rest of the season. We had no catchers. All of them were on the disabled list. We had, if you remember, there were three catchers there. They had, Brody was there, the other catcher,
Johnny Oates.
Johnny Oates, and Steve Yeager. And so I was the fourth catcher, but the other three were all on the DL. So I basically caught the rest of the season. The only catcher that had a chance to even catch a ball was Darryl Thomas, and he did play one game. They gave me a day off, and he played one game. I played for the rest of the season all the way through.
Wow.
Darryl wasn't any bigger than a Q-tip. If someone had thrown, if J.R. Richard would have put him back through the other end of the umpire if he had to catch him.
You should have seen it was just hanging all over the gear. The gear couldn't even fit him.
Hey, Harper, I want to follow up on what Joe was saying about the Dodgers. And I, as you know a ton of Dodger former players. And 90% of them feel the same way. And especially when you compare the O'Malleys, who took care of people, who took in Don Newcomb and Sweet Lou Johnson and gave them jobs for the rest of their life, and took in, I could go on and on about the things I know they did behind. And then you look at when Joe was with the Dodgers in '72, they had an old timer game there. They invited like 100 guys back. You know, Carl Spooner, who pitched for the Dodgers, and Dick Nen, who hit a famous home run for the Dodgers, and all, as well as rock stars like Joe DiMaggio and Lefty Grove. It was the greatest old time. That's what they used to do. Now they don't want to spend money for people who are out of town. There's one guy that I'm not going to mention his name, but the players I know hate him that works for the Dodgers. This is a guy that never made the high school ping pong team that's now calling shots for the Dodgers. And what did they say? You could hold his funeral in a phone booth, because this guy is hated by everybody I know. And so, it's like, that's what's going on. Now, the Dodger team, I'm a Dodger fan all my life, because the team has nothing to do with the people. But it's not the same as the O'Malley era, I'll tell you that, because
it's just not the same ownership anymore. So, and like I said, I don't watch baseball much anymore. I was never a big fan. I never watched from the stands. I always just played. That was it. That's all I cared about, was just playing. But like I said, there's something wrong with that ownership. I don't know what it is, why they treat people the way it is, but it's not right. It's not right. But it doesn't have.
Think about it, Joe. The Dodgers are the former players, and that's what the O'Malleys honored. They honored the Jackie Robinsons and the Gil Hodges, and that's who the Dodgers are. They're not these current guys. They're not Ohtani. They're all the people that made them the Dodgers, and they refuse to recognize that. And I know some of how they treated friends of mine that were there, and I don't think it was a big league treatment. Let's put it that way.
No, it's not. But like you say, the players, I love them. They got really good players. The catcher that they have, he's improved himself as a catcher. He still has some problems. But the thing is, he's an excellent hitter, and he's a big time hitter. He hits a big situation. So I mean, they really have some great players on that team.
Bob, to your point, I was lucky enough to have a friend who had tickets the same day as an old timers game, and I can't tell you how many. And I'm probably 10, 12 years old, 13 at the time, and I don't know all of the names and the significance of, but I'd heard them because I listened to Dodger games. Vin Scully would always give a story about Johnny Roseboro or Johnny Padres or Pee Wee Reese. So when they show up, I have a Vin Scully interpretation in my mind of what they look like and what they meant to the organization and their historical value, even if it was just for one afternoon. The thing that I remember, that when you were speaking about these old timer games and Joe DiMaggio was there, and all these others, Casey Stengel, for example, I remember seeing Casey with the uniform that had the logo of every one of the teams that he had managed or been a part of. So it had Yankees, Pirates, White Sox, it had everything. And it was so funny to watch that as a kid, because look at that. But the historical value of that.
Yeah.
The thing that, and please forgive me for taking so long to get to the point.
That's
There
okay.
were so many players that were there that many of them didn't even get to play, and they didn't care. They were there, and it was the camaraderie and a great time to be to put a hat on one more time and to wear your spikes and run out there, even if you didn't play. There was a value to that. What I saw as a fan, to get to see these guys one more time, and as a player to be seen one more time. Is there any truth to that from your standpoint, Joe?
Absolutely. To me, players that in that era, there was a camaraderie between the teams that played. In other words, they didn't have to be on the same team. They just all would get together, okay, because of all the memories that they had of each other and the memories that they created for fans. And so they all wanted to be together because they don't get to see each other very often. That's the problem. In other words, I don't get to see the players that I played with anymore in Los Angeles because of where I live. But I would like to go see them, but there's nothing that brings me out there anymore. And so I think that's the reason why we appreciate so much when we get a chance to do that. And, the thing is, I grew up in San Francisco. It wouldn't take much to figure out who my favorite player was if I grew up in San Francisco, right?
Willie Mays.
You know who that player was, right?
Willie Mays.
Willie Mays, okay. For me, Willie Mays was the greatest player I have ever seen in my life. There used to be guys that used to play against him. They would get there early just to see Willie Mays go on the field and do what he did. He'd start go over and play third base. He'd go over and play shortstop. He'd go play first base, okay? Then he'd get to the, and these guys would be in the dugout watching him hit and play and everything else. It was a delight just to watch this guy play. When I got to finally play against him, okay, and beat him, especially when I was a coach, he was a wonderful person. He was a kind person. He gave everything. Anything that he got, he always spread it around to the rest of his teammates. He was a wonderful person. And the thing is, he never took for granted for what he did. He couldn't actually teach what he did. I don't think anybody could hit like him. I don't think anybody could catch the ball like him. It was not something that he could teach. So he kind of shied away from trying to help players in that respect. But if it was advice for them to do and to help them as a player, he was there to do it. And I tell you, I miss him. I miss seeing and talking with him.
I got a great Willie Mays story for you. I'm
Okay.
in training in 1979. This is when I was working with Carew. It was his first year with the Angels. We're in the Palm Springs. I'm in the visiting dugout. Who comes in with Jilly Rizzo, who was Sinatra's bodyguard?
Oh, yeah, I know Jilly very well, yes.
Yeah, Jilly's bringing Leo DeRocher in, and they put an angel hat on his bald head, and he sat in the dugout next to me because he had open heart surgery, and he was living at Frank's compound to get through. He and Frank were very close. So he sat down, and a reporter came up to him, and this said it all. A reporter said, "Leo, you roomed with Babe Ruth. You've seen every player in the history of baseball. Who would you say is the greatest player you've ever seen?" And he got a smile on his face. And what he said is undisputable. He said, there are 5 things you judge a player for: hitting for average, hitting for power, base running, fielding, and throwing. And he said, in the history of baseball, there's only one player that I have ever seen that is a 10 plus in all 5 areas. You can't say that about Stan Musial, Ted Williams, Babe Ruth, on and on and on. He was a 10 in all 5 areas, and that's Willie Mays. And so when I heard that come out, and I thought, I never forgot that, because you can say, oh, this guy was great or that guy. No, not in all 5 areas. A 10. They might have been a 9 in one area or a 5, but so that said it all for me.
Yes,
Well, Bob, too, throw in this factor. There may be other guys that maybe run a little bit faster or had a higher batting average, but for a longer period of time, and with the numbers that Willie had, there's no one.
No.
There's no one that had the numbers that he had. And I was going to ask you, Joe, there are a lot of folks that are afraid or don't want to meet their heroes because once they do, it changes their perspective forever. I'm guessing that it wasn't that way with Willie. He still had that charisma and charm that a young man, a young player, a young Joe Ferguson would admire. And the old Joe Ferguson, excuse my French for saying that you matured and when you finally got a chance to meet him, still valued that just as much.
Absolutely. It's just, he was a very kind person. But he came, you got to remember, he came from a different era. I mean, he was in the Negro Leagues and everything else. And when he came up, he had a very tough, I think, believe Leo DeRocher might have been his first manager. And when he first started in the big leagues in 1951, he struggled. But he stayed with them, and he just put his arm around him and said, "Don't worry about it. You're going to be my center field. Just go out there and just keep playing." And he went on from there. But he was a very kind individual, and you got to remember, this guy hit 660 home runs in 3 years to service.
BS, before steroids.
Can you imagine how many he would have hit in 3 years when he was averaging about 50 a year?
In his prime, yeah.
Imagine him on steroids. Imagine him on steroids.
Yeah, he didn't beat him. He really didn't beat him. So, yeah, that's a shame too. You know, the steroids have kind of, that's a tough thing that happened in baseball. I wish that would have never happened, but it wasn't considered illegal when they took it, and I think we have a little problem deciding who the best players are and who should be in the Hall of Fame. I think there should be some reconsideration for some of those players.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you know, that have hit all those home runs and played so well for so many years. You know, Bonds was a shoo-in for the Hall of Fame before he even started taking steroids. He was going to be in the Hall of Fame.
Clemens, what about Roger Clemens? Come on, 7 Cy Young Awards.
Exactly. And the thing is, there has to be, you have to understand that happened. It's part of baseball. That was part of the time. So it should be not considered something that should be held against them. And they should put them in the Hall of Fame. They belong there.
I agree. Mark McGwire, when he was taking steroids, they weren't illegal. It's like taking vitamin pills. They weren't illegal.
Nobody, there was no rules against it at the time. And I know what those guys looked like when they were young. Canseco and McGwire both. These guys were like little slender sticks when they were young. And they became behemoths because of this. Okay. But it doesn't change the fact that they did what they did. They hit the home runs. They had great years, and they should be in the Hall of Fame.
It's an interesting perspective, isn't it, when you consider the men that are voting allowed for players who were drunk. We've spoken about a couple of them. Players that were taking amphetamines, right, during all the late 60s and 70s and whatever. No problem with them. You know, no problem if you, have a family issue or something like that. But very interesting perspective. I appreciate you giving us that, Joe. Before we let you go, you got to manage. You got to do some other things post-career. Is that because the love of the baseball game itself was something that you wanted to keep going, or was it just, hey, it's all I've done during my professional life. I want to keep doing it, and I want to stay. I want to wear a hat for as long as I possibly can in my life. You know, I tell me a little bit about what prompted you to cross over from the player to the manager side.
Part of it is that I was a baseball person. You know, and I wanted to be in baseball for as long as I could be in baseball, if I could. But the thing is, I actually thought I could help some people. And that's why I did it. I felt that the first job that I had that brought me to Baltimore, and Sid Thrift was the minor league director there. I interviewed with Sid Thrift, and Sid Thrift said to me, he says, "What the hell are you doing here?" He says, "You played in the major leagues. You've been playing for like 30, you've been in the major leagues for over 25, 30 years. Why do you want this job? It doesn't pay very well." I said, "I don't care about the pay. I make enough money. I don't need the pay." I just feel that I can help some people. So I convinced him, and so he let me go out and start managing for Baltimore. And that's how it started. And then I went pretty much another 20 years helping players to become the best that they could be. And so, I mean, I think I got more out of it than some of the players did, because I love going to the ballpark, and I love the action to go out there to win the games. And I tried to influence the players that, hey, this is development, but at the same time, you got to learn how to win. We're not just going to go out there and we're just going to go out there and just show up. That's not baseball. There's a winning attitude that you have to have, and you have to learn how to do that. And there's certain things you have to do on the field, okay, to get that. And that's the way I treated all of them. They all got a lot out of it, and a lot of them went to the big leagues because of it.
Yeah. And if you want to learn how to lose, you can. I won't stop you, but guess what? I won't have you around for very long. So, and neither will anyone else. It's a business, and it is a game, but it's both, but it's very, very competitive, Joe. I appreciate you doing that. And Jim McMahon was a teammate. I played against him in college. I played against him in the pros, but I also played with him on a couple of occasions. And he says, I'm doing what I love to do. I've never worked a day in my life. Football has been that good to me. I would imagine the pay wasn't the thing. It was just, I want to be able to give back to the game. And I think also, Joe, wouldn't it be fair for me to say, because you're dealing with pitchers, because you've been in the outfield, you have a different perspective in the way that you view the game than a guy that basically only may have been in one position.
Absolutely. It helped me. Because I tried to become a person that understood all that, every bit of that, so I could help pitchers, I could help catchers, I could help infielders, outfielders, didn't make any difference. I could help hitters, and so I felt that I had that ability to do that. And so I treated every player exactly the same. If they needed help, then I had to take them out. I'd throw batting practice to them. We do all kinds of things to try to get to the point where they could find themselves and become the player that they could potentially become.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason why I did it. And that's why I stayed in the minor leagues as long as I did.
You mentioned it just a moment ago how Willie Mays struggled a little bit. We had Bobby Valentine on about a month ago in the minors. He had one of his managers put his arm around him and said, "You are my second baseman." And it changed his perspective. Can you think of any examples where you did something like that? Listen, I know you're struggling right now, kid. I believe in you. I want you to know and hear it from me. You are my fill in the blank. You are this player, that player, you're a catcher, you're my designated hitter, you're my starting pitcher, where you knew that it was going to lead to him being more successful because he just needed to hear that in between his ears to develop the confidence that he needed to go out there every day and do something that he's been doing since he was a kid.
Absolutely, yes. And the thing is, you got to remember in the minor leagues, not everybody is there as a prospect. First of all, most of them are not going to play in the big leagues. Okay, but you have 25 players on a team, and you have to fill out that roster if you have 5 or 6 teams. But the thing is, there's going to be once in a while you'll come across the player, okay, that for some reason or another you see something in that player. He may not be the best player on the team, he may not be drafted very high, but you see something in that player. And so I knew who the prospects were, and I spent a lot of time with them because that's where the guys are going to go, hopefully, to the big leagues. And they're the ones that the organization wants to see go up quickly. But I was always looking for the person that might be somebody that was maybe fell through the cracks, okay? And so that's the player that I wanted to see if I could help him to become maybe a chance to get to the big leagues, but maybe become a very good player. And there was one that I had that became exactly that because of the way I was treated as a player and the way I was coached by Tommy Lasorda, and that was Mike Piazza. Mike Piazza, okay, became a Hall of Famer, and nobody wanted him. Not one person in the Dodger organization wanted him. And the only reason why they drafted him is because Tommy Lasorda said, "I want him drafted." And so they drafted him. And he
Fif-
worked.
56, wasn't he a 56th round pick? Something like it was just you
He was
you
the
couldn't
last.
be picked any lower than that.
He was the last pick.
Wow.
That's what he was. And so when he got picked, okay, he was going to be, I want to say maybe that's a spring training before the draft. His father took him to spring training, and because he wanted to have Michael work out for Tommy. And Tommy told me, he says, do me a favor. And I'm coaching for Tommy now. He says, take Michael out to the backfield and see if you think he can become a catcher. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Two things that Michael could do. He had tremendous strength and he had a tremendous arm. And I said, okay. I took him back out and I threw some balls. I said, I want you just to sit down in a stance. And I just want to throw a ball. I want to watch you receive the ball. And then I said, I put some balls by him and I went to second base and I says, I want you to just throw some balls to me to second base. And at that time, he had a really good arm. He had a cannon. And he threw the ball and I said, okay, fine. That's all I need to say. So I went inside and told Tommy and his father that he can catch. He's going to need to do a lot of work, but he can become a catcher.
Right.
And so that's where we started. And from there, he became the catcher for the Dodgers. Okay. And from that point, he went on to become the guy that went to the Hall of Fame.
Yeah. How'd that work out for him? How'd that turn out for Mike Piazza? Are you kidding me? It's amazing. Well, a great eye by you. Go ahead, Joe. Please forgive me. Go.
Interesting thing. Michael was absolutely treated the worst you could ever be treated by the Los Angeles Dodgers at that time. They were starting to turn over the people were turning over in that organization, all the different people that were scouts and everything else, and nobody wanted the guy. As a matter of fact, when he played in Daytona Beach, and down in Dodgertown, he was in Dodgertown, and they were playing in the league there. They wouldn't even catch him. They would just send him up there to hit once in a while, and then that was it. So he was actually at one point during that season, he quit and went home. And Tommy called some people down there at Dodgertown, and he says, "Why?" And he goes, "Well, he can't catch." And he says, "What do you mean he can't catch? How many times you catch him?" He says, "Well, actually, we didn't catch him." So anyway, he got talking to come back, and when he came back, that's when he started working hard and doing the things that he needed to do, and that's where I got involved with him, seriously involved. In the winter, I went and watched him. I stayed with him. I took him to the Dominican Republic. I took him there. I coached him there, and brought him right to the big leagues. Okay. And the job was going to be between him and Carlos Hernandez. Remember that, Bob? That name, Carlos.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And so we had a big meeting, and we decided that Michael would become the catcher. And we all know what that first year produced for Michael Piazza.
Wow.
Home runs, 100 some odd RBIs, and hit like 325. And so,
Was that a close decision? The reason I asked, Joe, is because I know literally of a player who ended up being a all-pro running back, and it was a coin flip between him and another guy to see who was going to get cut in training camp. It was that close of a thing. And it was just a discussion where half the folks are saying, no, I want the other guy. And half the folks are saying, let's try this Piazza. And somebody had to make a split decision in one person's favor, and it could have ruined another.
Yep, it was. That's exactly the way it was. Let's put it this way. I'm not a big fan of Fred Claire. But Fred Claire was kind of pushed out of this position because Tommy made the decision. He says, no, he's going to be the catcher. He says, Carlos Hernandez cannot hit like this kid. And he says, he's not a bad catcher, but he is not the same guy, and we're going to go with Piazza. That's how it is. That was it.
Wow.
Whenever you say Fred Clare, I always got to tell Al the Bull said the funniest newspaper clipping he ever read in his life when Fred Clare traded Pedro Guerrero to the Cardinals, and he said he couldn't field. And Pedro Guerrero, who didn't speak real good English, the headlines were, Pedro Guerrero says, I'd like to hit some ground balls to Fred Clare.
You know who else he traded?
You?
No.
No?
I was coaching that. Martinez.
Oh, Pedro. Yeah. Yeah.
How about who he traded him for?
Can't remember.
Little second baseman from Toronto.
From where?
Alfredo Griffin?
Huh?
No, Alfredo was a shortstop.
No, it wasn't Alfredo. It was a second baseman.
Sachs?
No. Somebody else. I can't remember.
Oh, I'll have to look it up.
In fact, I think he might have killed himself. He might have shot himself.
Now I'm struggling. I don't remember. Well,
Yeah, anyway.
there's been some bad decisions that have been made. Go ahead, Joe.
I like that. How could you trade Martinez as the best arm you've ever wanted to see, and he traded him for nothing?
Yeah.
Well, look at the great. They got rid of Bobby Welch, and he wins 27 games in Oakland. They got rid of Dave Stewart. He becomes a 4-time 20-game winner. They got rid of Rich Sutcliffe. He won the Cy Young in Chicago.
Yep. So, I mean, like I said, things changed in that organization, and it wasn't for the better. It wasn't for the better. So it's a shame, and a lot of that has to do because once free agency started, that had a lot to do with it because they had to make decisions that maybe they didn't want to make, but they did it anyway. And then plus they would fall in love with certain players, but the other guy was the opposite. In other words, they just said, well, maybe we could do without him. And they just made some bad decisions.
You know what I find strange though? Now think about it. The Dodger organization this year has to be the wealthiest organization in the history of sports, with the Japan and the international, and yet they're still cheap to former players. You know, and that does not make a lot. I understand if they're cheap and they're a small market area and they have to count the baseballs, but I do not understand why this organization does not spend money flying guys out, doing this, honoring the past. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You know, what did Casey Stengel tell me? One thing he taught me, be nice to the little guy. And if you forget the people that made your brand, that's not being nice to the little guy. You know, that's just my opinion.
Yeah, you're exactly right. I don't know why it is that way. I have no idea.
Yeah.
But you're exactly right. They don't spend money on anybody, and they will not. They will never do it.
Nope.
Well, I'm not defending anybody. I just know that if I spend more money than I'll ever understand for the right to own a ball club, and I don't start seeing the return on that, and that means cutting off funding for the T-shirts and the golf polos and the other things that we're going to do for our farmers because we need to make that money back. It's the wrong way to do it, but I know that I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying that we got to break even first before we do anything.
Sure.
But it snowballs into something where you become unreliable, and in your case, Joe, undesirable. You know, there's some things in the organization you said just a few moments ago, and if they called, I wouldn't receive the phone call, and that to me speaks volumes about how deep the hurt is and how long it's been going on.
What's the old saying? The fish stinks at the head first.
At the head, exactly.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, Joe, give us an idea what you're doing now, if you don't mind. Tell us you're about to have an 80th birthday coming up here next year,
Yeah.
but for crying out loud, what does Joe Ferguson do? Is it just golf? Do you play cards? Do you have a business that you're running? Tell us a little bit about you.
No, I don't have a business. I just basically I watch over my kids. I'm very involved with, and so I'm very proud of all of them. And once in a while, when I get the chance, I try to go golfing. Don't have the best balance anymore. I don't have quite the same energy before, but I get out there once in a while.
Good for you. I love it. Yeah. Yeah. And it's too bad there's no golf in Myrtle Beach or the surrounding area. What a shame.
Yeah, what a shame. There's only 85 golf courses. Yeah. So, yeah, and I've played a few of them, and they're nice, but I just don't have the same energy as I used to have, and it's tough because I'm losing my balance a little bit, and so it's tough
Okay.
to walk. I can do about 9 holes, and that's about it.
Well, um, get a chiropractic adjustment, and we'll get you a new set of clubs. The hybrids now you don't have to swing hard. You can hit it 240 yards. It may not go straight, but you can hit it that far. So,
I can hit it pretty good. The thing is, right now I only use about 4 clubs. That's about all I need.
um, Joseph Vance Ferguson, thank you for being with us. We want to thank you also for all that you did for the game, to make it better, to remember it in the right way, and to appreciate the history of it and your part there within. Getting to play in a World Series and hitting home runs and winning one in 81, 81, and then the 88. You've been around some championship baseball. You've seen the good, bad, and the ugly. You spoke about a lot of that here today, and we thank you so much for your time. Bob, final words here from you, if you don't mind, not only introducing us to your dear old friend, but one of the heroes of the game of Major League Baseball.
Well, I always love it when Joe comes to LA, which is not very often anymore, but I feel like I've been visiting him for 2 hours now, and it's been great to see you, Joe, and I'm so happy you're doing good, and you're nice. I learned some things today that I never knew. I never knew Lasorda is the one that's tremendous to hear that he's the one that suggested you catch. And I also didn't know you were a pitcher.
Yeah.
So, as much as you think every time we have a guest on here, I always learn new things about him. You know what I mean? So thank you for the great reminiscing about a great time in the history of baseball. You know what I always say? What's the greatest era of baseball? When you were young, and we were all younger then, and it was just a great era.
Yep. And I thank you very much for having me. It's been a pleasure. And hopefully, maybe we can do this another time. So I enjoyed doing this. I've done a couple of them, and it's always fun. And it's been fun with both of you. And so anyway, good luck with the rest of the podcasts that you do. And like I say, we'll see each other down the road.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Joe. We appreciate the compliment. And again, what a kind guest you are. And for you to go back with such clarity and recollection from some things that happened literally 50 some odd years ago, and for you to have that pinpoint precision, it certainly makes it more entertaining and obviously of greater value. Thank you. Appreciate it. We want to thank you for tuning in, everybody. 100 Yards of Football is grateful to have Bob Case, and the show is called The Sports Page. We appreciate you being a part of it. We hope that you would tell others about it when you get to hear about guests like Joe Ferguson and the memories that he had during his 14-year Major League Baseball career. We hope that we learn a little bit more about him along with you as well. So for Bob Case, for Joe Ferguson, I'm Harper LaBelle saying thank you for tuning in.